He slid the divorce papers across the table on their fifth wedding anniversary. The sourdough was still in the oven, the candles were still burning, and his words cut deeper than any knife. You are small, Charlotte. I need a wife who fits the billionaire world, not the daughter of a gardener who smells like fertilizer. She was given $50,000 and told to disappear by morning. What Preston Ashford didn't know was that the gardener, the old man in muddy overalls, who he had mocked for 5 years, was the secret owner of a $3 trillion empire. The same empire that was about to buy Preston's company. The same man who was about to walk into that boardroom, sit down at the head of the table, and say 7 words that would destroy Preston's entire life. I believe Yodu just divorced my daughter, but here is what makes this story different. Charlotte didn't win because her father was rich. She lost everything twice. She was humiliated on national television. She was fired by her own board. She was called a puppet, a fraud, a joke. And she came back, not with her father's money, with her own spine. This is the story of a woman who was told she was nothing and proved she was everything. Stay until the end, because the final twist is something you will never see coming. Lesson and value. Statement. Before we begin, here is what this story will give you. It is not just entertainment. Buried inside this drama are real lessons about protecting yourself in a divorce, the power of documenting everything, why you should never let one person control all your finances, and the difference between being rescued and rescuing yourself. If even one of those lessons sticks with you, this story did its job. Because the truth is simple. You reap what you sow. And the people who try to make you feel small are usually the ones who are afraid of how big you really are. If this story moved you, if it made you angry or gave you chills or reminded you of your own strength, do me a small favor. Hit that like button. It costs you nothing, but it tells the algorithm that stories like this matter. Drop a comment and tell me, what would you have done if you were Charlotte? Would you have forgiven Preston, or was the reckoning exactly what he deserved? And if you are new here, subscribe and ring that bell. We drop new stories every single week. Stories about people who were underestimated and came back stronger than anyone expected. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Sometimes a story is the reminder someone didn't know they were waiting for. Now let us begin. He threw the divorce papers on the mahogany table, and the sound echoed like a gunshot through their silent penthouse. Charlotte Keating had spent the entire afternoon preparing. The sourdough was in the oven, golden and rising. She had set the dining table with the ivory candles they had bought together in Vermont, back when Preston still held her hand in public. 5 white roses sat in a crystal vase, because white roses were what he had carried on their first date, back when he still remembered what flowers meant. It was their 5th wedding anniversary, and Charlotte had made his favorite meal. She didn't know it was also the last meal she would ever cook in this kitchen. Preston Ashford walked through the front door at exactly 7:15. He was wearing his charcoal Tom Ford suit, the one that cost more than most people's monthly rent. His hair was slicked back with mathematical precision. His shoes were Italian, hand-stitched, polished to a mere finish. Everything about Preston Ashford was designed to communicate one message. I am better than you. He didn't notice the candles. He didn't notice the roses. He didn't notice the bread. He dropped a manila envelope on the table and said 5 words that detonated Charlotte's entire life. Sign these tonight. I need you out by morning. Charlotte laughed. It was a reflex, the kind of laugh that escapes when your brain refuses to process what your ears just heard. Very funny, she said, wiping her hands on her apron. Happy anniversary to you, too. Preston didn't smile. He pulled out his phone and held it up so she could see the screen. It was a photograph of a woman at a charity gala. Raven hair, red dress, diamonds around her neck. Not just any diamonds. The exact necklace Charlotte had admired 3 months ago at Tiffany's. She had shown Preston a picture of it, hinting, hoping. He had laughed and said, maybe for Christmas. He bought it for someone else. I bought it for her, Preston said, his voice flat and clinical. She actually looked like she deserved it. Charlotte stared at the photo. The woman was Isabella Vance, the VP of Marketing, the senator's daughter. The woman who always stood a little too close to Preston at company parties, while Charlotte pretended not to notice. Preston, what is this? Charlotte whispered. It's a correction, he said. He walked to the kitchen island and poured himself a scotch. A Macallan 25. He didn't offer her any. He never did anymore. I am closing the biggest deal in New York history tomorrow, Charlotte. Ashford Dynamics is merging with Helios Global. Do you know what that means? It means I am moving into the billionaire bracket. It means state dinners, galas, the Met, Davos. He paused, letting the word Davos hang in the air like it was supposed to impress her. Then he gestured at her outfit. A soft, oversized beige cardigan she had owned since college. Her hair was in a messy bun. She had flour on her cheek. And I cannot walk into that world with this, he said, waving his hand at her like she was a stain on the furniture. Charlotte felt her chest tighten. What do you mean, this? I mean you, Charlotte. You are small. You are content with small things. Baking bread, volunteering at the shelter, visiting your father in that shack of his. It is a cottage, Preston. And he is my father. He is a gardener, Preston laughed. A landscaper who smells like fertilizer and cheap tobacco. Do you remember the last time he came here? He tried to fix the sink. I have plumbers for that. I don't need your blue-collar baggage dragging down my image. Charlotte felt something cold settle in her stomach. Not anger. Not yet. Something worse. Recognition. The slow, terrible recognition that the man standing in front of her had been planning this for a long time. And he had. The penthouse lease, Preston explained, adjusting his cufflinks, had been transferred to his name alone 3 months ago. The car she drove was registered as company property. The joint savings account, the one she had contributed to every month from her modest freelance income, had been emptied and moved to an offshore account 6 months ago. Her name had been quietly removed. Charlotte Keating had been financially erased from her own marriage, and she hadn't even known it. The settlement is generous, Preston said, tossing the envelope toward her. The condo in Portland, the Honda, and $50,000 in cash. $50,000. 5 years of marriage. 5 years of cooking his meals, hosting his clients, smiling at his jokes, shrinking herself to fit his ego. And her price tag was $50,000. Preston checked his Rolex. I am staying at the Four Seasons tonight. Isabella's helping me redecorate the penthouse tomorrow. Sign the papers and leave the keys on the counter. Don't make this messy, Charlotte. You cannot afford the lawyers I can. He grabbed his coat and walked toward the door. At the threshold, he paused without turning around. And Charlotte, take that ridiculous cardigan with you. I don't want her finding it. The door clicked shut. Charlotte stood in the silence. The sourdough was burning. The smoke alarm began to shriek, a piercing mechanical scream that filled the apartment. She didn't move. She didn't reach for the oven. She didn't open a window. She slid down the kitchen wall and sat on the cold tile floor, the anniversary candles still flickering on the table she had set for two, the smoke alarm screaming above her, the smell of burnt bread filling the home she had just lost. 5 years, she whispered to no one. I gave him 5 years, and he erased me in 5 minutes. She sat there for a long time. Then she picked up her phone, the old one with the cracked screen, and she made 2 calls. The first was to her best friend. The second was to her father. Both of those calls would change everything. But Charlotte didn't know that yet. She was still sitting on the kitchen floor, thinking she was the smallest person in the world. She had no idea she was about to become the most powerful woman in New York City. She just didn't know it yet. Maggie Torres arrived at 11:14 at night wearing pajama pants with little cartoon avocados on them, a Georgetown law hoodie that had seen better days, and carrying a bottle of Trader Joe's red wine and a half-eaten bag of Doritos. She didn't knock. She had a key. "Okay," she announced, kicking the door shut behind her. "First things first, did you sign anything?" Charlotte was sitting on the couch in the dark. The smoke alarm had finally stopped. The penthouse smelled like failure and burnt bread. "No," Charlotte said quietly. "I didn't sign." "Good." Maggie set the wine and chips on the coffee table and sat down across from her. "Second thing, is there more sourdough, or did he ruin that too?" Charlotte almost smiled. Almost. Maggie was 5'3", loud, perpetually single, and one of the sharpest divorce attorneys in Brooklyn. She had a gift for making people laugh at the worst moments of their lives, and she wielded humor like a surgical instrument, cutting through shock and grief to find the person still breathing underneath. She also couldn't cook to save her life, which she freely admitted. Maggie stood up and began walking through the penthouse like a detective at a crime scene. She opened drawers. She checked closets. She looked in the master bathroom cabinet. "He took the espresso machine," Maggie announced, her voice rising with genuine outrage. "That man has no soul. I can forgive the affair. I cannot forgive stealing the Breville. That was a good machine." Then she got serious. She sat back down and leaned forward, her brown eyes sharp and focused. "Charlie, listen to me carefully. Right now you are in shock. That is normal. But shock is temporary, and stupid decisions made in shock are permanent. So here's what we are going to do tonight." She held up one finger. 1. You are not signing those papers until my team reviews them. He's counting on you being emotional and compliant. We are going to be neither. 2 fingers. 2. Tomorrow morning, I am filing an emergency motion to freeze every joint asset he hasn't already moved. The offshore accounts are trickier, but we have forensic accountants for that. 3 fingers. 3. And this is the most important one, Charlie. Before you leave this apartment tonight, you are going to document everything. Every room, every bank statement you can find, every piece of jewelry, every receipt. You are going to take photographs with timestamps. Courts love timestamps. Timestamps are a divorce lawyer's best friend. Charlotte nodded slowly. Her brain was starting to work again. Maggie always had that effect on her. Maggie was chaos and competence wrapped in avocado pajama pants, and she was exactly what Charlotte needed right now. They spent the next hour going through the penthouse. Charlotte photographed every room. She found bank statements in Preston's home office that confirmed what he had told her. The joint account had been drained months ago. Her name had been removed from the penthouse lease. Insurance policies had been changed. She had been methodically erased. And then Charlotte found something else. In the bottom drawer of Preston's desk, hidden under a stack of quarterly reports, there was a second phone, a burner, the kind you buy at a gas station. Charlotte reached for it. "Don't touch it," Maggie said sharply. Charlotte pulled her hand back. "Take a photo of it." Photograph the drawer, the location, the phone itself. Get a close-up. But do not pick it up and do not turn it on. Why not? Because right now, it is evidence in its natural habitat. The moment you touch it, Preston's lawyers will argue contamination. But if we photograph it in place and get a subpoena, whatever is on that phone becomes admissible. Let the lawyers open that Pandora's box. Charlotte took 6 photographs from different angles. Then she closed the drawer. Smart girl, Maggie said. Now where are you going tonight? My dad's place, the cottage in Connecticut. Maggie wrinkled her nose. The one with no Wi-Fi and the toilet that runs. That is the one. Maggie walked her to the door. At the threshold, she grabbed Charlotte's shoulders. Listen to me. You are going to feel like the world ended tonight. It didn't. Preston Ashford ended. And honey, that is not a loss. That is a renovation. We are just clearing out the old drywall. Charlotte hugged her, hard. Then she grabbed her overnight bag, the one she always kept packed for weekend visits to her father, and walked out of the penthouse for the last time. She drove to Connecticut at 2 in the morning. The roads were empty. The rain had stopped, but the pavement was still wet, and the headlights of her Honda Civic carved tunnels of light through the darkness. The cottage was small and set back from a dirt road lined with oak trees. It had a wraparound porch, a vegetable garden that was twice the size of the house, and a mailbox shaped like a fish that Charlotte had painted when she was 9. Walter Keating was sitting on the porch in a flannel shirt despite the cold. He was 64 years old, with white hair, weathered hands, and the kind of deep blue eyes that looked like they had seen everything twice and were not impressed either time. He didn't ask what happened. He just stood up, walked down the porch steps, and held his daughter while she cried. The next morning, Charlotte told him everything over coffee. Walter listened without interrupting. He sipped from his battered thermos, the same one he had carried every day for as long as Charlotte could remember. When she finished, the kitchen was quiet except for the sound of birds outside. He offered you $50,000, Walter said slowly, like I was a line item he was closing out. And the merger with Helios. He told you about this? He said it would make him a billionaire. He said he needed a wife who fit that world. Walter stood up and walked to the window. He looked out at his garden. Tomatoes, sunflowers, herbs growing wild. His hands, rough and calloused, rested on the windowsill. Charlie, I need to tell you something. I should have told you a long time ago. Charlotte looked at him. I have some connections in the business world, more than you know. I have kept it quiet because I wanted you to build your own life without the weight of money changing how people treated you. Charlotte set her coffee down. What do you mean, connections? How much are we talking, Dad? Walter paused for a long time, the kind of pause that carries weight. Enough to make Preston Ashford's merger look like a lemonade stand. He didn't say Trillionaire. He didn't say Helios. He didn't explain. He just said this. I am going to handle this. But I need you to trust me. And I need you to do something very hard. What? Sign the divorce papers. Give him exactly what he wants. Let him think he has won. Charlotte stared at him. Everything in her screamed no, but she had never seen that look in her father's eyes before. It wasn't anger. It was something older and harder. It was the look of a man who had been patient for a very long time and had just been given permission to stop. I will see you in the morning, Walter said. We have some talking to do. And Charlotte, don't worry about Preston Ashford. Walter picked up his thermos and walked toward the door. That boy just made the worst mistake of his life. He just doesn't know it yet. The next morning, the headquarters of Ashford Dynamics was buzzing with electric energy. This was the day. The acquisition. The deal that would make Preston Ashford a billionaire and put his name alongside the titans of American industry. Preston strode through the glass doors feeling like a god. He was wearing a custom navy suit from Savile Row that cost more than Charlotte's father probably made in 5 years. His shoes were hand-stitched Italian leather. His tie was silk, the color of old money. Beside him walked Isabella Vance, looking predatory and glamorous in a red sheath dress, her dark hair falling in perfect waves. Did she sign? Isabella asked, checking her reflection in the elevator chrome. Signed and gone, Preston said with a smirk. Back to the dirt where she belongs. Good, Isabella purred, linking her arm through his. Today is about the future. But I heard a rumor. The CEO of Helios is coming personally. Preston stopped walking. The CEO of Helios Global was a ghost, a phantom. No one knew his name. He operated through shell companies, holding groups, and proxy boards. He had never attended a merger in person. Not once in 30 years. The security detail downstairs is massive, Isabella said. Someone important is here. Preston straightened his tie. Good. I will charm him too. Whoever he is, he will see that buying Ashford Dynamics was the best decision he ever made. They stepped off the elevator onto the executive floor. The place was chaos. Assistants running with coffee, lawyers reviewing binders, phones ringing. The air was thick with ambition and expensive cologne. And then Preston noticed something that didn't belong. In the corner of the waiting area, sitting on a plush leather sofa that cost $10,000, was an old man. He was wearing faded denim overalls, a flannel shirt that had seen better decades, and muddy work boots that were leaving marks on the polished floor. He held a battered thermos in one hand and a folded newspaper in the other. A faded baseball cap covered most of his face. He looked like he had wandered in from a highway rest stop. Preston's face twisted in disgust. He marched over to the security desk. "Why is there a vagrant in my waiting room?" he snapped. "We have the Helios board arriving in 10 minutes. The guard looked nervous. "Sir, he has a pass. He said he is waiting for the 10 o'clock meeting." "A pass from who?" "The janitorial staff." Preston scoffed and walked directly up to the old man. "Excuse me." He tapped the man's shoulder aggressively. "You need to leave. Now." The old man lowered his newspaper. He had a weathered face, deeply lined by decades of sun and wind. His hands were calloused, dirt visible under the fingernails, but his eyes were piercing blue, startlingly sharp and strangely familiar, though Preston couldn't place them. "I am waiting for the 10 o'clock, the old man said. His voice was calm and gravelly. "The 10 o'clock is a closed-door billion-dollar merger," Preston snapped. "It is not a soup kitchen line. Get your rear end off my sofa before I have security drag you out." The old man looked down at his muddy boots, resting on the edge of the glass coffee table. "Comfortable couch, genuine Italian leather, right? You pay for this with the Q3 profits. I paid for it with my success," Preston spat. "Something you would never understand. Look at you. You are a mess." "You smell like mulch." The old man smiled slightly. "Mulch is the smell of growth, son. You seem to prefer the smell of cologne and desperation." Preston's face went crimson. "Get out. Right now. I will not have my office tainted by trash right before the most important meeting of my career." Isabella grabbed his arm. "Preston, calm down. Do not make a scene. The Helios team will be here any second. Just ignore him." The elevator dinged. 6 men in black suits stepped out. They moved with military precision, their shoes clicking in unison on the marble floor. These were the Helios global attorneys, the best legal minds money could buy. Terrifying, humorless, and radiating the kind of power that made other lawyers nervous. Preston instantly switched modes. He smoothed his jacket. He put on his winning smile. He turned away from the old man and extended his hand to the lead attorney, a silver-haired man named Sterling. "Gentlemen," Preston announced, "welcome to Ashford Dynamics. This is a historic day." Sterling didn't smile. He didn't even look at Preston's outstretched hand. He looked past Preston toward the sofa. All 6 attorneys walked past Preston without a word. They approached the old man in the overalls. And then Sterling, the most feared corporate attorney on the eastern seaboard, bowed his head. "Good morning, sir," Sterling said with immense reverence. "The paperwork is ready for your review." The old man folded his newspaper, tucked it under his arm, and stood up. He stretched his back, cracking it with a sound like knuckles popping. He picked up his thermos. "Thanks, Arthur," the old man said. Preston stood frozen. He blinked. He looked at the old man, then at the attorneys, then back at the old man. "I am sorry," Preston laughed nervously. "Is this a joke, Mr. Sterling? Is this man with the maintenance team or something?" The old man turned to Preston. He took off his baseball cap. His hair was white and thinning, but those blue eyes were hard as diamonds. And in that moment, standing in the most expensive office in Manhattan, wearing clothes that cost less than the doormat, Walter Keating didn't look out of place. Everyone else did. Maintenance, Walter mused. "I suppose you could say I maintain a portfolio of assets, one of which happens to be Helios Global." The blood drained from Preston's face. "My name is Walter Keating," the old man said, extending a calloused hand that still had garden soil under the fingernails. "I believe you know my daughter, Charlotte. You fired her from your life yesterday." Preston's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Walter turned to Isabella. "Miss Vance, I know your father." "Senator Vance. Lovely man. Terrible poker player. Tell him Walter says hello." Isabella went white. Walter turned back to Sterling. "Shall we go to the boardroom, Arthur? I believe I have a company to buy and a CEO to evict." The walk to the boardroom was a funeral procession, and Preston Ashford was the corpse who didn't know it yet. His legs felt like jelly. His mind was racing, scrambling to make sense of what was happening. Walter Keating. Charlie's dad, the guy who drove a 1998 Ford F-150 and wore flannel shirts. The man who smelled like fertilizer and tried to fix the penthouse sink with a wrench from the hardware store. He was the owner of Helios Global. It was impossible. Helios was worth $3 trillion. It owned shipping lines, tech companies, pharmaceutical giants. A gardener could not own that. But the way the high-powered lawyers deferred to Walter, holding the door, pulling out the chair at the head of the table, it was undeniable. Walter Keating sat at the head of the boardroom table like he had been sitting at the head of tables his entire life. Despite the overalls, he commanded the room with a terrifying gravity. He placed his thermos on the polished wood. "Sit," Walter said. Preston sat. Isabella sat beside him. She was trembling. Walter unscrewed his thermos and poured himself a cup of black coffee. The steam curled upward in the silence. "So," Walter began, "let us review the acquisition of Ashford Dynamics. The price agreed upon was $4.2 billion. "Yes," Preston said, his voice cracking. "Yes, sir. A fair price for a healthy company." Walter took a sip of coffee. "But see, I have been doing some digging. Since you decided to divorce my daughter, I figured I no longer had to play the nice, poor father-in-law. I could finally be myself." "I didn't know," Preston stammered. "Charlie never told me." "Charlotte doesn't care about money," Walter snapped. "That is why she is better than you. That is why she is better than me. I made my fortune in mining and rare earth metals in the 70s. I hated the suits. I hated the fakes. So I built an empire from the shadows and raised my daughter to value people, not price tags." Walter leaned forward. "I thought you were that man, Preston. For 5 years I held my tongue. I watched you roll your eyes at my truck. I watched you buy Charlotte cheap gifts while buying yourself a $70,000 watch. I told myself, he is arrogant, but he works hard and he takes care of her." Walter pulled a document from his back pocket. It was crumpled, folded twice. But when he smoothed it on the table, the letterhead was unmistakable. "Forensic accounting, federal level. But then I looked at the books," Walter said softly. Preston stared down at the document. His hands began to shake. "You have been cooking the books, Preston. Inflating Q2 revenue by 40% to boost the valuation for this merger. Hiding debt in offshore shell companies in the Cayman Islands. Blue Horizon, Apex Capital. Creative names. Very creative accounting." Isabella turned to Preston, her eyes wide with something that looked like fear but might have been calculation. "Preston, is this true?" "It is creative accounting," Preston protested, sweat beading on his forehead. "Everyone does it. It was to enhance the valuation for the sale." "It is fraud," Sterling interjected, his voice sharp as a scalpel. "Federal securities fraud. Felony level." Walter took another sip of his coffee. He seemed to be enjoying it. "See, if you were still married to Charlotte, I might have handled this quietly. I might have let you resign, given you a golden parachute to save her the embarrassment. Families protect each other." Walter's expression changed. The warmth disappeared. What replaced it was something cold and ancient and patient. "But you are not family anymore. You signed the papers. You made it very clear that you want to be judged solely on your business merits. So let us judge you on your business merits." Walter tapped the table. "The deal is off, Preston. Helios is withdrawing the offer." Preston shot to his feet. "You cannot do that. The market knows about this deal. If you pull out, the stock will tank. Ashford Dynamics will be worthless by noon." "Exactly," Walter said calmly. "And when the stock hits zero, I will buy the controlling interest for pennies on the dollar. I will own your company, your patents, and your building. And I will not pay you a dime." "This is insane," Preston shouted. "You are destroying a billion-dollar asset just for revenge over a divorce." "I am a trillionaire, son." Walter shrugged. "I can afford to burn $1 billion to teach a lesson. It is an expensive bonfire. But I like the heat." The doors to the boardroom opened. "And," Walter added, "I believe the new interim CEO is here to accept your resignation." Preston turned around. Walking into the room was Charlotte. But she wasn't wearing the beige cardigan. She was wearing a tailored white power suit that fit her perfectly. Her hair was down, cascading in waves. She looked powerful, radiant, and completely transformed. "Hello, Preston," she said. Her voice was steady. "Charlie," Preston whispered, "what are you doing?" "Dad asked me to step in," she said, walking to the front of the room. "I have an MBA from Stanford, Preston. Did you forget? You were always so busy talking about yourself that you never noticed I graduated top of my class." Charlotte sat down in the CEO chair. For a moment, the room was perfectly still. Then Walter spoke. "Mr. Ashford, you are fired. Security will escort you out." Two guards appeared at Preston's elbows. One of them was Miller, the same guard Preston had fired 3 months ago and rehired at a lower wage. Miller was not hiding his smile. As they pulled him toward the door, Preston looked back at Charlotte one last time. She was already reading the financial reports, her brow furrowed in concentration. She didn't look up. And for the first time in their marriage, Charlotte Keating did not watch Preston leave. Charlotte's first week as CIO was a hurricane. She worked 18-hour days. She brought in an outside auditing firm to untangle Preston's financial web. She met with every department head personally. She held an all-hands meeting where she told 6,000 employees the truth about the fraud and promised them that their jobs, their pensions, and their dignity were safe. They believed her because she didn't talk like a CEO. She talked like a person. Maggie flew up from Brooklyn and set up a temporary legal command post in the conference room, surviving entirely on vending machine, coffee, and what she called strategic Doritos consumption. Walter stayed in the background. He advised, but he didn't interfere. He told Charlotte, "This is your ship now. I just bought it for you. You are the captain." For 1 week, Charlotte allowed herself to believe she had won. The employees were rallying. The audit was uncovering the full extent of Preston's fraud. The press was calling it the most dramatic corporate takeover in recent memory, and Charlotte's face was everywhere. Then the bomb went off. It landed on a Monday morning in the form of a Wall Street Journal front-page story. The headline read, Keating Takeover, Billionaire Father Uses Daughter as Puppet CEO in Revenge Plot Against Ex-Son-in-Law. The article was devastating. It quoted anonymous sources inside the company, claiming Charlotte was incompetent and overwhelmed. It described Walter Keating as a vindictive trillionaire waging a personal war. It included a photograph of Charlotte at the homeless shelter where she volunteered every Saturday, serving soup in a hairnet. The caption read, "The new CEO of a $4 billion company was serving soup last week." Charlotte read the article in her office with the door closed. Her hands were shaking. "They are making me a joke, Dad," she said over the phone. Walter's voice was calm. "Who planted this?" he asked. They traced the leak within hours. Isabella Vance. She hadn't slunk away quietly after the takeover. She had gone straight to the press. And she hadn't stopped there. Isabella had called her father, Senator Richard Vance. And Senator Vance had friends on the Senate Banking Committee. Within 48 hours, Charlotte received an official letter on congressional letterhead. The Senate Banking Committee was opening a formal investigation into whether Walter Keating had used his daughter as a proxy to execute an illegal hostile takeover of Ashford Dynamics. Charlotte sat in the boardroom at midnight, alone. The congressional letter in one hand. The Wall Street Journal spread on the table. Her phone was exploding with interview requests she couldn't answer. Every network wanted a piece of the puppet princess. She called Maggie. "They are going to take everything, Maggie, not because I did anything wrong, because I am the easy target. I am the woman in the soup kitchen hairnet. That is all they see." Maggie was quiet for a moment. Then she said something Charlotte would remember for the rest of her life. "You are not easy, Charlie. You are inconvenient. There is a difference. Inconvenient people change the world. Easy people get walked on. You are not being walked on anymore. You are being fought because you are standing in the way of powerful people who got comfortable. That is not weakness. That is threat." Charlotte wiped her eyes. "What do I do?" "You fight back, but not their way. Your way. You go public. You tell your story before they finish writing it for you." Charlotte agreed to do a live interview on CNBC. Maggie prepped her for 2 days straight. Walter told her it was a bad idea. Charlotte did it anyway. "I cannot hide behind you forever, Dad," she told him. "If I am going to be CEO, people need to hear my voice, not yours, mine." The interview started well. Charlotte was composed and articulate. She spoke about protecting employees. She spoke about cleaning up the books. She spoke about building a company that valued integrity over image. Then the host leaned forward with that particular expression that means something terrible is about to happen. "Charlotte, we have someone who would like to join the conversation via satellite." The screen behind her flickered, and there was Preston, on bail, wearing a suit again, looking polished, rehearsed, and dangerous. "Charlotte," he said, his voice dripping with false sincerity, "I just want the truth to come out. I loved you. Your father forced you into this. He is using you as a weapon because I asked for a divorce. That is not justice. That is revenge disguised as a corporate strategy." Charlotte froze. Millions of people watching. Then Preston played his ace. He held up a document. "This is a psychiatric evaluation from Dr. Rebecca Hayes, Charlotte's own therapist. It shows that Charlotte was diagnosed with severe anxiety disorder and clinical depression. She was medicated throughout our marriage. Is this really the person we trust to run a company that manages hospital infrastructure and public safety systems?" The studio went silent. Charlotte felt every camera lens in the room bore into her like a physical weight. Her most private pain, the anxiety she had fought quietly for years, the therapy sessions she attended in secret because Preston told her that mental health treatment was weakness, all of it broadcast to the entire country. But something happened in that silence. Something shifted inside Charlotte. She had spent 5 years shrinking. 5 years making herself smaller to fit Preston's ego. She looked directly into the camera. "Preston," she said, her voice clear and steady. "You just shared my private medical records on national television. That is a federal crime, and yes, I have anxiety. 30 million Americans have anxiety. It does not make us weak. It makes us human. What makes someone weak is being so afraid of a woman with a sourdough recipe that you have to destroy her medical privacy just to feel powerful." The internet exploded. Within the hour, the hashtag #CharlieStrong was trending, but the damage was done. The board of directors called an emergency meeting the next morning. The boardroom at Ashford Dynamics had floor-to-ceiling windows that made you feel like you were floating above Manhattan. Charlotte had always found the view beautiful. Today it felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. The board was already seated when she walked in. 8 faces. Not one of them met her eyes. The chairman of the board was a man named James Crawford, 62 years old, silver temples, a voice like aged leather. He had been on the board for 15 years. Charlotte had assumed he was an ally. He had shaken her hand warmly on her first day. He had told her that Ashford Dynamics was lucky to have her. That was 7 days ago. "Charlotte," Crawford began, folding his hands on the table, "no one in this room doubts your intelligence. Your work in the first 2 weeks has been remarkable, but the situation has become untenable." Charlotte felt the floor tilt beneath her. "The congressional investigation," Crawford continued, "the media coverage, the satellite ambush on CNBC. Institutional investors are pulling their positions. We have lost 15% of market cap since the interview aired. The stock is in free fall." "I am stabilizing the company," Charlotte said. "The audit is ahead of schedule. We have recovered $200 million in hidden debt. The employees trust me." Crawford nodded. "And that work is valued. But trust does not move markets, Charlotte. Perception does. And right now, the perception is that this company is being run by a woman installed by her billionaire father as part of a personal vendetta. The board has voted to install a temporary independent CEO while the congressional investigation proceeds." Charlotte looked around the table. Every single face was turned down. "You are removing me," she said. "We are protecting the company. You are protecting yourselves." Silence. Charlotte stood up. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She picked up her bag, smoothed her suit, and walked out. In the hallway, movers were already packing her office. She could see them through the glass walls, placing her personal items in cardboard boxes. The plants she had brought from home. The framed photograph of her and her father at the cottage. A small ceramic jar of sourdough starter. She took the elevator down alone. The numbers counted backwards. 80, 60, 40, 20. In the lobby, a security guard she had been kind to every morning, a young man named Jeffers, who she always asked about his daughter's soccer games, was waiting with a pained expression. "Miss Keating," he said, "I am sorry, but I need your badge." Charlotte unclipped it. Her hand was steady, but her voice wasn't. "Take care of the plants in the corner office," she said. "They need water every Tuesday." She walked through the revolving doors and onto the sidewalk. No car, no driver, no title. It was raining. A cold, persistent New York rain that soaked through everything. Charlotte stood on the same stretch of sidewalk where Preston had stumbled weeks ago, and she understood something she hadn't understood before. The system didn't care who was right. It cared who was convenient. And Charlotte Keating had stopped being convenient. She walked 40 blocks in the rain to Maggie's apartment in Brooklyn. By the time she arrived, she was soaked through. She knocked on the door. Maggie opened it, took one look at her, and pulled her inside without a word. Maggie handed her a towel and a glass of wine. I lost it, Maggie. I lost everything again. You lost a title, Maggie said. You didn't lose yourself. There is a massive difference. Now sit down and eat this terrible lasagna I made, and let us figure out how to burn it all down. Legally. Charlotte sat at Maggie's tiny kitchen table. The lasagna looked like a science experiment. She took a bite. Maggie, what is this? Lasagna. This is not lasagna. This is a war crime against pasta. Noted. Now focus. Charlotte didn't focus, not right away. She sat in Maggie's kitchen and cried for 20 minutes straight while Maggie rubbed her back and didn't say a word. Sometimes the best thing a friend can do is shut up and let you fall apart. When the tears stopped, Charlotte blew her nose and said, "Okay. Okay, what?" Maggie asked. "Okay, I am done being the person things happen to. I want to be the person who makes things happen. That is the spirit. But can I just say, your mascara is doing something very avant-garde right now." Charlotte looked at her reflection in the microwave door and burst out laughing. It was an ugly laugh, a raw one, the kind that only comes after you have cried so hard you have nothing left. And in that moment, sitting in a tiny Brooklyn kitchen with war crime lasagna and a best friend in avocado pajamas, Charlotte Keating made a decision. She was done asking for permission. Walter Keating had not become a trillionaire by accident. He had done it by being patient, being quiet, and being absolutely ruthless when the situation demanded it. When Charlotte told him the board had removed her, Walter's first instinct was to buy every seat on the board and replace them all before lunch. Charlotte told him no. "If you rescue me again, they are right. I am a puppet. I need to do this myself, Dad." Walter looked at her for a long time, then he nodded. "What do you need from me?" "Resources, not action. I need access to your legal team. I need the forensic accounting data. And I need you to trust me the way you asked me to trust you." Walter smiled. It was a small, proud smile. "The table is yours, Charlotte. Play it your way." Charlotte's first move was the one nobody expected. She called Isabella Vance. "Meet me. Alone. No lawyers, no press." Isabella agreed. She was curious, probably planning another attack. They met at a diner in Queen, not a trendy brunch spot, a real diner with cracked vinyl booths, coffee that tasted like it had been on the burner since last Tuesday, and a waitress named Dolores, who called everyone honey and didn't care about corporate takeovers. Two women sat across a formica table. One had just lost everything. The other had betrayed her in every way a person can be betrayed by another person. Charlotte spoke first. "You leaked the Wall Street Journal story. You sent your father after me. You are trying to install yourself as the power behind whatever puppet CEO the board picks to replace me. I know all of this, Isabella." Isabella sipped her coffee. She didn't flinch. And you are going to help me take down the board instead." Isabella set her cup down. "Why would I do that?" Charlotte reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. Inside were printouts, photographs, timestamps. "Because I found the second phone," Charlotte said. "Preston's burner phone. The one I photographed the night he threw me out." Maggie got a subpoena. The phone contained 14 months of text messages. "Not just to you, Isabella, to James Crawford, the board chairman." Isabella's composure cracked, just slightly. "Just enough. Crawford was in on the fraud," Charlotte continued. "He received kickbacks on every offshore transfer. He knew about Blue Horizon. He knew about Apex Capital. He signed off on the inflated revenue numbers because he was getting a cut." Charlotte leaned forward. "Crawford didn't remove me to protect the company. He removed me to protect himself. And the moment the congressional investigation gets close, he is going to throw you to the wolves to save his own skin. You know this. You are too smart not to. Isabella stared at the folder. If Crawford goes down, he takes everyone with him, Isabella said quietly, including me. Not if you cooperate. I do not need to destroy you, Isabella. I need you to be exactly what you have always been, a survivor who picks the winning side. Isabella was quiet for a long moment. The diner clattered around them. Dolores refilled their coffees. A man at the counter laughed at something on his phone. You are not the woman Preston described, Isabella finally said. No, Charlotte replied. I am the woman he was too stupid to see. Charlotte's second move was even bolder. She called Crawford directly. She told him she wanted to meet. She told him she was ready to negotiate her exit package, that she was tired, that she just wanted the whole thing to be over. Crawford agreed immediately. He thought he had won. People always move fastest when they think the fight is already over. They met in Crawford's private office. Charlotte wore a simple black dress. She looked exhausted. She looked defeated. She was wearing a wire. For 40 minutes, Charlotte played a role. She was meek. She was agreeable. She fed Crawford a carefully constructed lie that Walter was about to sell his Helios shares and walk away, that the old man was tired and just wanted to go back to his garden. Crawford relaxed. When people think they have already won, they get sloppy. They say things they would never say otherwise. Between you and me, Charlotte, Crawford said, leaning back in his leather chair with a glass of bourbon. This whole thing was never about the company. Preston and I had an understanding. He handled the creative accounting, I handled the board. We split the proceeds from the offshore transfers 70-30. You knew about the fraud from the beginning. I designed half of it, Crawford laughed. Preston was the face, but I was the architect. When your father showed up, I had to act fast. Removing you bought time. Once the investigation fizzles, I will install my own candidate, and business continues as usual. And Preston? Charlotte asked, keeping her voice even. You are still in contact with him. Crawford waved his hand. He calls from a smuggled phone in the prison. Gave us the playbook on how to handle you. He said, she is soft. Push her once and she will crumble. I guess he was right. Charlotte smiled. He was right about the old Charlotte, she said. She stood up. She unbuttoned her jacket slightly, revealing the edge of the wire. Crawford's face went the color of wet concrete. Charlotte delivered the wire recording and Isabella's sworn testimony to the FBI on a Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, federal agents had raided Crawford's office, seized his computers, and found a hidden safe behind a painting of a sailboat that probably cost more than most people's houses. But Charlotte didn't go to the press. She didn't hold a press conference. She didn't tweet. She did something that surprised everyone, including her father. She went directly to the employees. She rented a conference room at the Marriott across the street from Ashford Dynamics headquarters. She sent a personal email to every department head, every team leader, every shift supervisor. 200 people showed up on a Wednesday afternoon, confused and curious and afraid. Charlotte stood in front of them. No podium, no teleprompter, no power suit. She wore a simple white blouse and dark pants. She looked like what she was, a woman who had been through hell and was still standing. I am not here as CEO, she said. I was removed from that position, as you know. I am not here as Walter Keating's daughter, although I am proud to be his daughter. I am here as someone who knows what it feels like to be told you are not enough. She paused. Preston told me that. The board told me that. The press told you that about your company. They said Ashford Dynamics was damaged goods. They said the brand was toxic. They said you should be worried about your futures. She looked around the room. But this company is not Preston Ashford, and it is not Charlotte Keating. It is you. Every patent, every line of code, every late night, Every problem solved and product shipped. That was you. And I am going to fight to make sure you do not lose your pensions, your jobs, or your dignity because of men who treated this company like a personal bank account. The room was silent for 3 seconds. Then someone in the back started clapping. Then another person. Then the whole room was on its feet. It was the first standing ovation Charlotte Keating had ever received. And unlike the polite applause she got when the board installed her as CEO, this one was real. She had earned it, not with power, but with honesty. The next day, the FBI finished processing Crawford's safe. What they found changed everything. Crawford had kept documents that proved Preston Ashford hadn't just committed financial fraud. 3 years earlier, Preston had identified a small artificial intelligence startup run by a woman named Dr. Sarah Caldwell. Dr. Caldwell had developed a breakthrough neural network architecture that would become the backbone of Ashford Dynamics' flagship AI platform. Preston didn't license the technology. He didn't acquire the company fairly. He bankrupted Dr. Caldwell's startup through a series of predatory legal maneuvers, then hired away her engineering team and claimed the technology as his own. Dr. Caldwell lost everything: her company, her research, her reputation. She now taught introductory computer science at a community college in New Jersey. Maggie called Charlotte with the news. He didn't just cook the books, Charlie. He stole the whole recipe, the core technology that made Ashford Dynamics valuable. He stole it from a woman and then erased her. Charlotte drove to New Jersey the next day. She found Dr. Caldwell's address through public records. It was a modest duplex with a small garden out front and a cat sleeping on the porch. Charlotte knocked. A woman in her late 40s answered. She had tired eyes and ink stains on her fingers. "Dr. Caldwell," Charlotte said, "my name is Charlotte Keating. My ex-husband stole your life's work. I am here to give it back." Dr. Caldwell stared at her for a long time. Then she opened the door wider. "You had better come inside and call me Sarah." Charlotte Keating had learned something in the weeks since Preston threw those divorce papers on the table. She learned that victory is not a single moment. It is a series of choices, and every choice has a cost. Her next cost arrived in the form of a tabloid headline. It was Preston's final move. From his cell in federal detention, communicating through the smuggled phone that Crawford had helped him obtain, Preston Ashford played his last card. He contacted a reporter at a New York tabloid and gave her a story that couldn't be ignored. The headline read, "Keating Fraud: Trillionaire Walter Keating's Hidden Fortune Built on Environmental Destruction." Inside the documents that exposed decades of ecological devastation in South America. The article included photographs, old ones, from the late 1970s and 80s. Mining operations in Bolivia, stripped mountains, polluted rivers, workers in conditions that no modern standard would permit. And the article was true, not entirely, not in every detail. But in its core, it was true. Walter Keating had made his first fortune by tearing minerals out of the earth with methods that scarred the land and poisoned water supplies. He had spent the last 20 years and more than $2 billion on remediation and restoration projects. He had funded environmental research. He had quietly paid reparations to affected communities, but the damage had been real, and the photographs didn't lie. Charlotte confronted her father at the cottage. She drove up unannounced. She found him in the garden, on his knees, pulling weeds. "Is it true?" she said. She didn't sit down. She stood over him, holding the printed article. Walter didn't stand up. He stayed on his knees in the dirt, looking up at his daughter. "Yes," he said. "Not all of it. The article exaggerates the timeline and combines separate incidents. But the core, yes, I made my first billion by tearing a mountain apart in Bolivia. I was 28 years old. I didn't care about anything but growth. It took me 20 years and a daughter to understand what I had done. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was ashamed, Charlotte, and because I wanted you to see me as the man I became, not the man I was. Every parent carries a version of themselves they hope their children never meet. I am not proud of who I was, but I am proud of who you are. And you became who you are without knowing any of this. That was the point. Charlotte sat down on the garden bench. The anger was still there, but underneath it was something more complicated. Love, disappointment, understanding. The recognition that people are not one thing, that her father was both the man who held her while she cried and the man who had scarred a mountain. You cannot undo it, Dad. No, but you can do better. That is why I gave you the company, Charlotte. Not for revenge, for redemption, mine and yours. Charlotte was quiet for a long time. The sun was setting over the garden. The tomatoes were heavy on the vine. A bird was singing somewhere in the oak tree. I am going to acknowledge it publicly, Charlotte said. All of it. No spin, no damage control, just the truth. Walter nodded. He looked relieved. I would expect nothing less from you, Ladybug. Charlotte returned to New York and drafted a public statement. She didn't let the PR team touch it. She wrote it herself, in longhand, at Maggie's kitchen table. She acknowledged Walter's history. She detailed the remediation efforts. She announced a $1 billion commitment to environmental restoration in Bolivia, with full transparency and independent oversight. She didn't make excuses. She didn't minimize. She simply told the truth and committed to doing better. The statement went viral, but not for the reasons Preston had hoped. People respected the honesty. They shared it not with outrage, but with something rarer. Admiration for a public figure who told the truth when lying would have been easier. And then Charlotte did something else. She called a press conference and stood in front of cameras and said something that no CEO in the history of American business had ever said before. My father's fortune was built on practices that caused real harm to real people and real ecosystems. I cannot change that, but I can change what this fortune does going forward. Effective today, I am establishing the Caldwell Innovation Fund, $500 million to support women inventors and entrepreneurs whose work has been stolen, suppressed, or credited to someone else. This fund is named for Dr. Sarah Caldwell, whose groundbreaking artificial intelligence research was stolen by my ex-husband and used as the foundation of this company. Dr. Caldwell will serve as the fund's first chairwoman. In the front row of the press conference, Dr. Sarah Caldwell wiped her eyes. Beside her, Maggie was grinning so wide it looked like her face might split. In the back row, wearing clean overalls and his best flannel shirt, Walter Keating sipped from his thermos and said nothing, but his eyes were bright. The trial of Preston Ashford took place 6 months later in the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York. The courtroom was packed. Reporters from every major network jockeyed for position. They weren't there to see justice. They were there to see a titan fall. Preston sat at the defense table looking skeletal. The prison barber had given him a haircut that was technically neat, but lacked the $500 precision he was used to. His court-appointed attorney, a man named Klein, who smelled like stale coffee, shuffled papers beside him. The prosecution called Isabella Vance first. She took the stand wearing a modest charcoal blazer. She detailed every fraud, every shell company, every inflated revenue figure, every secret payment to Crawford. When Preston's lawyer accused her of being a scorned lover manufacturing evidence, Isabella's response was surgical. I was a strategic asset he discarded when I lost value. Sound familiar? He does it to everyone. Wives, business partners, employees. The pattern is always the same. Charm them, use them, discard them. I was not a lover. I was a tool he forgot to lock up. Crawford testified next, under a plea deal. He confirmed the board conspiracy. He confirmed the smuggled phone calls from prison. He confirmed that Preston had told him, word for word, she is soft, push her once, and she will crumble. Then the prosecution called Charlotte Keating. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Charlotte walked in wearing a simple cream-colored dress. She wasn't wearing the power suit. She wasn't playing a role. She looked calm. She looked like the only person in the room who wasn't fighting for something because she had already won. She sat in the witness box. Miss Keating, the prosecutor began, Mr. Ashford's defense claims that you and your father orchestrated a hostile and vindictive takeover, that you entrapped him. How do you respond? Charlotte looked at the jury. Then she looked at Preston. For the first time in months, their eyes met. Preston tried to summon his old glare, the one that used to make her apologize for things she hadn't done. It didn't work. She looked at him with something worse than anger. She looked at him with pity. My father didn't buy Ashford Dynamics to destroy Preston, Charlotte said. He bought it to save 6,000 employees whose pensions Preston was gambling with. He bought it because Preston had stopped being a CEO and had become a predator, feeding on the people who trusted him. Preston's lawyer pushed during cross-examination. Isn't it true you wore a wire to entrap Mr. Crawford? Isn't it true you performed on camera, faking tears to manipulate public opinion? Aren't you, Miss Keating, simply a more sophisticated version of the same deception you accuse my client of? Charlotte was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was steady. For 5 years, your client made me believe I was small. He made me believe I was lucky he even looked at me. He performed the role of a loving husband while he was stealing from shareholders, sleeping with his VP and destroying the career of a brilliant woman whose work he claimed as his own. His performance lasted 5 years. Mine lasted 5 minutes. I simply spoke his language so he would finally understand. She leaned forward, looking directly at Preston now. And as for entrapment, you cannot trap a man who is already running. Preston was running from the truth long before my father signed a check. I just built a wall so he would finally have to stop. The courtroom was silent for 3 full seconds. Even the stenographer stopped typing. The verdict came back in 4 hours. 14 counts. 14 guilty. Securities fraud. Wire fraud. Conspiracy to commit money laundering. Intellectual property theft. Obstruction of justice. The list went on. The judge, a stern woman with no patience for white-collar arrogance, looked at Preston over her spectacles. Mr. Ashford, you were given every advantage in this life. Education, opportunity, talent, a wife who loved you. You used it all to prey on the trust of others. You treated the economy like a casino and your family like collateral damage. I sentence you to 25 years in federal prison. No possibility of parole for the first 20. The gavel fell. It sounded like a door closing forever. Preston didn't scream. He didn't fight. He just slumped in his chair. The energy drained out of him like water from a cracked glass. Charlotte watched. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She watched them cuff him and lead him away. Then she stood, nodded once to the prosecutor, and walked out. Maggie was waiting in the hallway. How do you feel? Charlotte thought about it. Empty. I thought I would feel triumphant. I just feel done. That is not empty, Maggie said. That is closure. They feel similar, but one of them lets you move forward. Charlotte looked at her best friend, the woman who had shown up with wine and Doritos on the worst night of her life, the woman who made inedible lasagna and called it cooking, the woman who had never once told Charlotte to be smaller. Maggie, Charlotte said. Yeah, thank you. For all of it. The bad lasagna? The good advice? Everything. Maggie grinned. That is what friends are for, Charlie. Well, the advice part. The lasagna I am still working on. They walked out of the courthouse together into the sunlight. 1 year later, the Keating estate in the Hamptons was in full bloom. Not the manicured, sterile landscaping of a showplace. This was a riot of color. Wildflowers and hydrangeas, ancient oaks providing deep, cool shade, vegetable gardens that stretched in every direction. Walter Keating was on his knees in the dirt, wearing overalls even older and dirtier than the ones he had worn to the merger meeting. He was pruning a stubborn rose bush and humming a tune Charlotte didn't recognize. "Dad, you are going to get soil on your nose," Charlotte called from the terrace. She was sitting at a wrought iron table, reviewing a tablet. The screen displayed the Q3 earnings report for Keating Dynamics. Stock was up 22%. The clean energy division, the one Preston had mocked as a waste of resources, was now the company's most profitable sector. The Caldwell Innovation Fund had approved its first 50 grants. Dr. Sarah Caldwell had been named Chief Technology Officer. "Soil is good for the complexion," Walter grunted, standing up and cracking his back. A gravel crunch announced a visitor. A dented Volvo station wagon pulled into the long driveway. A man stepped out. He was tall with messy brown hair and a flannel shirt rolled to the elbows. He was carrying an architectural tube in one hand and a bag of bagels in the other. "Is that him?" Walter asked, squinting against the sun. "That is Daniel," Charlotte said. A genuine warmth rose in her cheeks. "He knows who you are. He knows I work in management for a tech company. He thinks you are a retired landscaper. He wants to ask your advice on soil composition for the community garden he is designing." Walter studied the approaching figure. "He drives a Volvo," Walter noted approvingly. "And he brings bagels? I like him already. Dad, I am serious. The last one drove a Porsche and brought divorce papers." "This is a significant upgrade." Daniel walked up the path with a shy smile. He had no idea he was walking toward a trillionaire and one of the most powerful female executives in the country. He just saw a nice woman and her dad. "Hey," Daniel said, holding up the bag. "I hope Sesame is okay. And sir, Charlie tells me you are the expert on nitrogen levels in soil. I would love your opinion on the garden layout." Walter wiped his dirty hands on his overalls and extended one to the young architect. "I know a thing or two," Walter said, gripping Daniel's hand firmly. "The secret, Daniel, is that you cannot force things to grow. You have to create the right environment and then get out of the way. Bad gardeners try to control nature. Good gardeners just listen to it." He glanced at Charlotte. "That goes for daughters, too." Charlotte watched them walk toward the garden together, Daniel gesturing enthusiastically with the architectural plans, Walter nodding and pointing at the soil. The sun filtered through the leaves. The wildflowers swayed. Somewhere in the oak tree, a bird was singing the same song it had been singing for 100 years. She felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Not power, not triumph, not even happiness exactly. Peace, the deep, quiet kind that comes only after you have survived something you didn't think you could. Far away, in a gray concrete cell, at the Otisville Federal Correctional Institution, inmate number 78,492 sat on the edge of a thin mattress. Preston Ashford was watching a small, crackling television mounted on the wall. The news anchor was smiling. And in a surprise announcement, Keating Dynamics CEO Charlotte Keating has pledged $1 billion to small business grants, stating that real growth comes from the roots up. Preston stared at the screen. Then he turned it off. His own reflection stared back at him from the dark glass. Older, thinner, a man who had everything and threw it all away because he thought everything wasn't enough. He lay back on the mattress and closed his eyes. The silence of the cell pressed in on him like water. He had wanted to own the world. He had wanted to be a titan. He wanted to be remembered as the man who conquered an industry. Instead, he would be remembered as the man who divorced a diamond because he thought she was a stone. In a warm, sunlit kitchen in Connecticut, Charlotte Keating pulled a loaf of sourdough from the oven. The same recipe from the night everything ended. The same recipe from the night everything began. The bread came out perfect, golden, warm, fragrant. Daniel walked in from the garden, soil on his hands. "That smells incredible," he said. "It is sourdough. It takes patience. You can't rush it." She cut a thick slice, handed it to him. He took a bite. "This is the best thing I have ever tasted," he said. Charlotte smiled. Not because of the bread, not because of the money or the company or the trial or the headlines, because for the first time in her life, she was not shrinking herself to fit someone else's table. She had built her own, and it was exactly the right size. And that is the story of how Charlotte Keating learned that the quietest people in the room are often the most powerful. She did not win because her father was a trillionaire. She won because when they stripped away the title, the money, the office, and the name, she was still standing. Preston Ashford thought he was playing chess against a housewife. He did not realize the board belonged to her all along. So, let me ask you, what would you have done? Would you have forgiven Preston? Or was the reckoning exactly what he deserved? Drop your answer in the comments below. And if this story reminded you that you are stronger than you think, hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. We drop new dramas every week. Thanks for listening, and I will see you in the next one. Closing statement. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful storytelling with real-life lessons. Every character, every twist, and every piece of advice was crafted with purpose, because we believe great stories should do more than entertain. They should leave you with something that lasts long after the screen goes dark. Thank you for watching. We will see you in the next one.